8. Lila. 1 week later, Sam Loomis was sitting in the office at the back of his shop, writing a letter to Marion. "Since I saw you last Friday afternoon," he wrote, "I've thought a lot about the things that you said. You're right. The money doesn't matter. I want to marry you now." While he was writing, Bob Summerfield, the young man who worked in the shop, called to him. "Sam, a young woman wants to see you." Sam walked into the shop and saw a pretty young woman with fair hair and a small suitcase. "I'm Lila, Marion's sister," she said without smiling. "Is she here?" "Of course not," Sam replied. "Is something wrong?" "I haven't seen her since last Friday," Lila said, her voice beginning to shake. "She left home without saying anything. She hasn't even phoned me. Look, if she's here, I want to talk to her. She's in bad trouble." She began to cry. Sam told Bob to leave the shop, then turned to Lila. "Tell me," he said softly, "what are you talking about? What kind of trouble is she in?" "Yes," said a flat, unfriendly voice from the door behind them. "Let's all talk about Marion." Sam and Lila both turned to see who was talking. A short man with a hat low over his eyes walked slowly into the shop. He was carrying a raincoat over his arm. "My name's Arbogast," he said, showing them a card. "I'm a detective, but I'm not with the police." He looked hard at Lila and said, "Now, Miss Crane, where's Marion?" "Why do you want to know?" said Sam. $40,000, Arbogast replied. "I don't understand." "Your girlfriend stole $40,000. Sam looked at Lila. "Is this true?" Lila explained everything. She spoke in a cold voice. She still believed that Sam was hiding Marion somewhere, but when she finished, her voice softened. "Listen, Sam," she said. "Her boss doesn't want to call the police. He just wants his money back. So if she's here—" "She isn't," Sam said quickly. "Miss Crane, can I ask you a question?" said Arbogast. "Why did you come here to Fairvale? Did you know that your sister was here?" "I hoped she was. I wasn't sure." Arbogast looked at her and said nothing. "It's true!" she cried angrily. "Why don't you believe me?" "I'm just doing my job, Miss Crane." "Really?" said Sam. "Then have you phoned any hospitals near Phoenix? Maybe she's had an accident." "That's not possible," Arbogast replied. "Her boss saw her in her car last Friday. She was driving out of Phoenix with the money." Then Arbogast looked at Lila. He gave her a warm, friendly smile to show that he finally believed her. "I think she's here, Miss Crane," he said. "Maybe not here with her boyfriend, but she's somewhere near Fairvale. I can feel it. Don't worry," he said, touching his hat and walking towards the door. "I'll find her." Chapter 9. A Few Questions. The next day, Arbogast visited all the hotels near Fairvale. He showed everyone a picture of Marion. "Have you seen this girl?" he asked them. The answer was always no. At last, as he was driving along the old highway outside Fairvale, he saw a small motel by the side of the road. "Maybe I'll be lucky with this one," he thought. "I've tried all the others." Arbogast left the road and drove up to the motel. Norman Bates was sitting outside his office in the evening sun, reading a magazine. He stood up and smiled as Arbogast got out of his car. "I almost missed you," Arbogast said. I forgot to turn on the sign, Norman replied. Do you want a room? No, thanks. I only want to ask a few questions. What sort of questions? Asked Norman, turning to go into his office. I'm trying to find a girl, said Arbogast, following him. My name's Arbogast. I'm a detective. Oh, really? Norman tried to smile calmly. A girl? Her name's Marion Crane, Arbogast explained. She's from Phoenix. She disappeared last Friday, and her family are very worried. He showed Norman the photograph. Have you seen her? Norman shook his head without looking. Maybe she stopped here about a week ago? No, I haven't had any visitors for more than 2 weeks. Business has been bad since they moved the highway. Can I see your book? Norman gave him the book from under the desk without speaking. He watched as Arbogast took out an envelope and studied the names in the book. Ah! Arbogast's fingers stopped at the name of Marie Samuels from Los Angeles. You see, she was here last Saturday night. Look, the writing is the same as on this envelope. So? Norman said in a weak voice. The writing on this envelope belongs to Miss Crane. Norman opened his mouth to speak, but his mouth was dry, and he couldn't think of the right words. Finally, he said, It's difficult sometimes. Arbogast looked at Norman. What's difficult? Remembering things. I know, Arbogast said softly, trying not to frighten him. You know, I wasn't lying, mister. I just forgot about last week. I understand. Arbogast's friendliness seemed to make Norman calmer. He smiled and asked to see the photograph again. This time he studied it carefully. Oh, yes, he said. I remember now. It was raining. This girl arrived late at night. She was tired and went straight to bed. She left early the next morning. Did she meet anybody here? No, she was alone. Did she phone anybody? No. How do you know? Norman shut his eyes. It was happening again. His face was burning, and he couldn't think of an answer. Finally, he said, She was tired. She said she wanted to go straight to bed because she had a long journey the next morning. And now, Mr. Arbogast, I'm very busy. I have to go. One more question, please, Arbogast said as Norman began to walk away. Is she still here? No, she isn't. I told you before. If you don't believe me, I'll show you all the rooms. No, that's all right, Arbogast smiled. He followed Norman outside. It was dark now. He looked up at the house on the hill and noticed a light in the window. Is anyone at home? He asked as Norman was walking away. Norman turned round and smiled. No. But there's someone sitting by that window. Arbogast pointed at the house. Oh, that's my mother. She's ill. Arbogast looked hard at Norman for a moment, then said, Did that girl offer you a lot of money? What do you mean? To hide her here, maybe. Look, mister, if you think I kidnapped her or something, I'm not saying that. But perhaps she offered you money and asked you not to tell anyone? Maybe she told you some stupid story. Mr. Arbogast, I'm not stupid, Norman said. No, of course you're not. But sometimes it's just too easy to believe a pretty girl. Even if I'm stupid, my mother isn't. Norman was getting excited again. "My mother didn't believe anything she said." "So, your mother met her?" Arbogast looked surprised. "Can I meet your mother, too? I'd like to talk to her." "No, you can't. I told you, she's sick." Arbogast wanted to talk to the mother, but there was something strong and icy about Norman now. He decided not to push him. "I'll come back later," he thought, "after I've phoned the girl's sister and told her what I know." Chapter 10. Shadow Behind the Curtain. After phoning Lila with the news of his conversation with Norman Bates, Arbogast drove back to the motel. There was a light in the office, and the sign was now on, but he couldn't find Norman anywhere. Looking up at the old house, he could still see the old woman by the window. He could see her shadow behind the curtain. "I'll have to go and speak to her without her son's help," he thought. After climbing the hill, Arbogast found that the front door was open. He walked inside, took his hat off, and waited for a few seconds. Everything was quiet. He looked at the mirror, the flowers on the wallpaper, the old pictures on the wall. Feeling sure that the son was busy somewhere, he decided to go upstairs and talk to the mother alone. He walked up the stairs very slowly. He didn't want to make a noise, and, if he was honest, he felt a little afraid. With its old furniture and silent rooms, this house was very strange. At the top of the stairs, Arbogast heard the sound of the bedroom door. He turned round and saw the old woman. She was running straight towards him, with her long dress, white face, and cold, mad eyes. He was too surprised to move. He saw the large silver knife above her head, and he tried to lift his hands, but he was too late. The knife cut his face open from the top of his head, through his left eye, to the corner of his mouth. He fell back down the stairs and lay very still. He couldn't move his arms or legs, but he could lift his head. With his one good eye, he looked up the stairs. The old woman was flying down towards him, the silver knife in her hand, screaming like an animal. The last thing that he ever saw was the terrible white face above him, as she brought the knife down straight into his heart. Chapter 11. A Visit to the Sheriff. Sam and Lila sat in the room behind the shop, waiting for Arbogast to return. "It's over an hour," said Lila. "Why isn't he back yet?" "Maybe he found something important." Lila pushed back her chair and stood up. "He's more than an hour late. He hasn't even called. I'm going to the old highway. I know he's found something. Are you coming with me?" Sam stood up with a sigh. "I'll go. You stay here," he said. "Somebody must be here if Arbogast comes back." The motel was dark and empty when Sam arrived. He called Arbogast's name several times, but nobody answered. He looked up at the big house behind the motel and saw somebody at the window. "I guess that's the mother," he thought. "The old woman that Arbogast wanted to speak to." He climbed the hill and tried the door. Again, no answer. Sam drove back to Fairvale. "There's nobody at the motel," he told Lila. "No Arbogast, no Bates, just a sick old woman who couldn't answer the door." "I'm worried," Lila said. "Something's wrong." "I agree," said Sam. "We have to tell the police. Let's visit Judge Chambers. He's the sheriff of this town. He'll be able to help us." The sheriff and his wife had to get out of bed to answer the door. It was late, but they asked Sam and Lila to come in. They listened while Sam told them about Marion and Arbogast. Arbogast phoned us to say that he wanted to go back to the motel. He wanted to speak to Mrs. Bates, said Sam. But that was 3 hours ago. I didn't know that Norman had a wife, said Mrs. Chambers, surprised. No, Sam explained. It's an old woman, his mother. The sheriff thought for a minute, then asked Lila, When did your sister disappear? She left Phoenix a week ago. How did you know that she came here? She came to see me, Sam explained. And she didn't say anything to you? The sheriff was still looking at Lila. No, she just ran away. From what? Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Lila said quietly, She stole some money. A lot? $40,000. Why didn't you tell the police before? We wanted Marion to give back the money without telling the police. Did this detective talk about the money when he phoned you 3 hours ago? Well, the money doesn't matter, does it? Lila cried unhappily. I just want to find my sister. The sheriff sighed and tried to look friendly. What can I do? I'm sure there's something wrong, said Lila. At the motel, I mean. Mrs. Chambers looked at Lila, and she felt sorry for her. Why don't you telephone Norman at the motel? She said to her husband. It's late. Oh, please call, said Lila. The sheriff sighed again and picked up the telephone. Hello? He said a few seconds later. Norman? It's Sheriff Chambers speaking. Listen, I have some people here. They're worried. Did you have any visitors tonight? No, not a customer. A detective? Judge Chambers listened quietly for a minute, then put down the phone. Yes, he said, turning to Sam and Lila. The detective was there tonight. Norman told him about the girl. The detective said thank you and left. Without seeing Mr. Bates's mother? Lila asked. The sheriff looked Lila straight in the eye. Norman's mother died 10 years ago, he said. She killed her lover, then she killed herself. It was in all the newspapers. Norman found them dead together. In bed. But that isn't true. I saw her, Sam cried. Yes, Lila agreed. Arbogast saw her too. Judge Chambers replied, looking at his wife. Very strange. If Norman's mother is still alive, who was the woman who killed herself 10 years ago? Norman Bates put down the phone after speaking to Sheriff Chambers. The police will be here soon, he thought. I must hide Mother before they come. He ran out of the office, up the hill to the old house, and climbed the stairs to his mother's room. Mother, I have something to say, he said. The old woman laughed. You're a stupid boy telling me what to do. Mother, it's important. No, I will not hide in the fruit cellar. I'm staying here. This is my room, and no one will ever take me away. They'll come for you, Mother, Norman tried to explain. That man came after the girl. Now someone will come after him. Mother, please, just for a few days, so that they won't find you. A few days in that ugly old cellar? No. You hid me there once before. I'll never go there again. Now go away! But Norman wasn't listening. He picked his mother off the bed and carried her out of the bedroom, down the stairs, and into the fruit cellar. Chapter 12. Room 1. The next day, Sunday morning, Sam and Lila met Judd Chambers and his wife as they were coming out of church. "Do you want to go to the motel with us?" Lila asked. "I went before breakfast," said the sheriff. "What did Mr. Bates say about my sister?" "The same as he told your detective. I promise you, Miss Crane, Norman Bates is alone at the motel. I looked everywhere." "You didn't even see his mother?" "No, I didn't. I'm sorry. If you want the police to help you, you'll have to make a report in the usual way. You can see me this afternoon, if you like. I'll be happy to help you." "Well," said Sam, after saying goodbye to the sheriff and his wife, "maybe I was dreaming, and Arbogast was lying. Perhaps I saw a shadow on the curtain, that's all." "You weren't dreaming, and Arbogast wasn't lying," Lila told him. "There's something wrong, and I'm going to the Bates Motel immediately. Come on." Sam and Lila drove quickly to the motel on the old highway. While Sam looked for Norman Bates in the office, Lila stayed outside. She was interested in the house on the hill. There was something dark and strange about it, even in the morning sunshine. Suddenly, she saw a tall, thin man at the top of the hill. He stood still at first. Then he began to walk quickly down the hill towards her. Lila called to Sam, who ran out of the office. Norman Bates wasn't surprised to see the young man and woman outside his office. He walked down the hill towards them with his hands in his pockets. "Do you want a room?" he asked them pleasantly. "Yes, please," said Sam. "Then follow me," Norman smiled, walking past them into his office. "Is room 10 okay?" he asked, taking the key from the small cupboard on the wall behind the desk. "I'd like to write my name in the book first," said Sam. "Okay." Norman took the book from under the desk and gave it to Sam. While Sam was writing his name, Norman watched Lila. She was looking at the list of names in the book. "I know who you are," Norman thought. "You're looking for the man who came yesterday. Well, you can look. You won't find anything. I've hidden everything. And you'll never find my mother in the cellar. But I mustn't make any mistakes. I must be careful." He took the book and pen from Sam. "Thank you," he smiled. "Now I'll get your bags. We haven't got any." "Okay, I'll show you to your room." "Don't worry," said Sam, taking the key. "We'll find it." When Sam and Lila were alone in their room, Lila sat on the bed and began to cry. "I know something terrible has happened to Marion," she said. "Seeing that old house on the hill, the way that man kept looking at us, I can feel it." "I agree," said Sam. "But we need to find something to show the police. Let's go and search room 1. That's the room that Arbogast said she stayed in, isn't it?" Sam and Lila opened the door and looked outside. They couldn't see anyone. Hoping that nobody was watching them, they hurried nervously back past the other rooms to room 1. They searched everywhere for some information about Marion. Something to show that Bates knew where the money was, perhaps. They found nothing in the bedroom, so they went into the bathroom. "That's interesting," Sam said. "No shower curtain." Suddenly, Lila noticed something. "Look," she said, picking a small piece of paper out of the toilet. It was wet, but she could still read something on it. It's a number. 40,000. She looked at Sam. This shows us that Marion was here. We know that already, said Sam. You don't understand. It shows us that Bates knew about the money. Okay, I'll talk to him, Sam said, and walked towards the door. But Lila stopped him. No, she said. Let's talk to that old woman in the house. She told Arbogast something, and I want her to tell me the same thing. You find Bates and talk to him. I'm going to talk to his mother. Sam wasn't happy about Lila's plan, but he agreed. Opening the door, he looked out. It's clear, he said to Lila. No one's watching. You can go. Sam quietly shut the door as Lila ran towards the hill. He found Bates in his office. Are you looking for me? Bates asked. Yes, said Sam, standing in front of Bates so that he couldn't see Lila. I'm bored. My wife's asleep, and I wanted to talk to someone.